Welcome to Module 3, Creating Change in Human Systems. This is Part 1, Creating Healthy Teams.
Welcome to the third module in the Human Systems course. My name is Ronnie Gill, and I'm here with Michael Broom. Michael, the topic of today's module is creating change in human systems. Tell us more about what that means.
Sure, Ronnie. Now that we understand from Module 1 human systems and our role in them from Module 2, we can explore how to create healthy systems and then how to turn dysfunctional human systems into functional ones.
Okay, so let's start with how you create healthy systems first. How do we create those teams?
There are three important areas for creating effective, healthy teams. In this course, Human Systems, we will only deal with safety, the most important area. The other two areas, conflict competence and effective decision-making, we will touch on, but they will be covered in depth in other courses.
Okay, so let's talk about safety then, Michael. What do you mean by safety?
Safety in any human system sets the stage for its effectiveness. We need to explore three sets of activities that leaders can do to create an atmosphere of safety. Number one, being candid, forthright, and open. Number two, being curious, interested, and appreciative. That's a difficult word to say. And three, cutting back interruptions. Consistently modeling candor, forthright, and openness, and your group will follow. Model uptight disingenuousness or defensiveness, and watch your group become uptight, disingenuous, or defensive. People are extraordinarily attentive to the behavior of their leaders. That's you. Nothing supports a group toward forthrightness than a leader who is speaking the truth, unvarnished with justification, blaming, stonewalling, sugarcoating, or other embellishment. People recognize when others are dissembling, pretending, or otherwise being less than forthright. We are all pretty good BS detectors.
So I really like that. I mean, those three things that you outlined for creating safety on teams. There is that, what did you call that? The open candor piece, which is a good one to create that safety. And that kind of curious appreciation. And don't interrupt. I love it. Three very simple ways to create safety.
Super.
So let's talk more about openness. What do you mean by that kind of warm candor or warm open candor?
Nothing supports a group to be open more than a leader who is open. To be open is to be forthcoming. To be open is to be willing to share useful information. Sharing gossip or inappropriate information, however, will trigger a group to close rather than open. An even deeper level of openness can be stimulated if you are willing to be open about your feelings. Leaders that share that they are excited, anxious, sad, or pleased earn big openness points with their teams. Emotional openness is very much appreciated, though undervalued by many leaders. Those same leaders are simply unaware of the impact they are having when they're being superficial and less than honest.
Okay, so, I agree that's that kind of transparency, that openness about emotions is good, but isn't there a risk of oversharing when it comes to emotional details?
Well, let's think. If it's oversharing about your personal life and you're going on and on about, what's happening with your children in real depth and that your dog just died and all of that, that could be a bit much, but so keeping open about things that are relevant to work and your general state of mind are very good. Being open about those things. Some leaders think it's bad to share bad financial information. But I disagree with that totally. That leaders should really share just about everything that is not prohibited by law, except for the oversharing piece, such as human resources information and health information.
Okay, so I can imagine that some leaders might find that level of transparency difficult. If we're not doing very well financially, there might be a fear that if I share that with people, they'll leave. And so they want to hold those kinds of cards close to their chest. What would you say to them?
I'd say to them, if you are a leader, particularly if you are a leader with maybe even bad financials, being open with your people is more effective than not sharing it. There are really very few secrets in organizations. And if your people ever suspect that you are not being forthcoming with them, that will decrease their suspicions about your being not trustworthy. And the trust of your people is a vital currency for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Michael. Let's talk about that second point you mentioned in creating safety, about being kind of curious and appreciative of your people to create safety in teams. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Leaders can support openness among their followers by being genuinely curious, interested, and appreciative of what they may be saying to you. The key word here is genuine. When your people feel that you are genuinely curious, interested, and appreciative of them, that will increase their sense of belonging. And belonging is something that we all want. Feigning them does not pass muster. Curiosity, interest, and appreciation evoke openness with the way the bees attract honey. This means being a great listener. You can avoid being distracted by your own thoughts by listening for the emotion of what is being said to you. You'll find that you'll pick up the content as well as the emotions. Consistently being forthright, honest, and open, followed by strong doses of curiosity, interest, and appreciation, and the group will act accordingly.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So to create that, to create safety on teams, we have to be what you just described. You have to be curious and appreciative of what others are saying. You have to be a good listener. And even before that, we talked about this idea of being open, transparent, having that kind of open candor. So that's great. So that kind of transparency, curiosity, and appreciation are two big steps in creating safety in teams. What was the third thing?
Okay. You want to accompany what we've already talked about with making interruptions rare. Everyone needs to finish what they are saying. Interrupting someone has three critical consequences that aggravate people and escalate conflict. First, interruptions curtail the flow of information. Second, it is irritating as all get out. And third, it foments other interruptions. Here's how it goes. I'm saying something to Ronnie, and Ronnie vehemently disagrees. Before I can finish, she interrupts me to give her point of view. As a consequence, only half of what I wanted to say is there, and I'm also irritated. So I interrupt her back. And now I only have half of what she wanted to share, and it just goes on and on and on until we're both irritated, cutting each other off, and we've just made a mess of things, and neither of us understand each other. Ever been there?
I have, actually. And as you were talking, I just was remembering back to a dynamic that I had on a team where we were in a meeting and people kept interrupting. And I didn't say anything because I was just like, what the heck is going on? I'm used to just saying my piece, allowing finishing, and I brought this up in the team. I said, I really have a problem with this interrupting behavior. And they said, oh, that's just the way we feed off of each other. So what would you say to something like that? It's like, oh, it's a fast moving dynamic, and you interrupt and you interrupt and you interrupt. And that's kind of the way we catapult on each other's words. And I'm just like, I had a really hard time in that environment. And maybe it's just because I'm an introvert and they were all extroverts. Does that have anything to do with it?
That's possible. But in the long run, I would bet you that if you interviewed each of those people individually, separately, they would tell you it's really a pain in the butt. So I would say, do not believe the nonsense that interruption is the way we feed off of each other. People need to feel heard if they're going to fully participate. I would bet you a dime to a dollar that there's several people in that team, like you, who felt that there is hardly room for them to even think, not to mention speaking up and sharing their thoughts.
Oh, interesting. So, it just brings me back this whole idea, because it was a brainstorming meeting. And in the recent sort of research around brainstorming, they find that better ideas are brought forward when people can individually think about those ideas and add them and then write them down, and then have the group discuss those ideas. You actually get better ideas, as opposed to everyone just throwing everything into a pile and going into a frenzy. So that kind of, it's kind of adjacent to what we're talking about in terms of interruptions. But going back to creating safety on teams, if you see this interrupting behavior happening, what can you do to interrupt it?
Somebody simply needs to say, would you let so-and-so finish, please? Can be done in a very pleasant tone. That's all. And if you find that someone is having to do that repeatedly, let so-and-so finish, please, then somebody also needs to call to the group's attention that we really seem to be busy interrupting each other, and is that really working for us? And do we want to make some kind of an agreement contrary to that? That's really all that is necessary. It generally works very well. Occasionally somebody's going to interrupt anyway. That's okay, as long as it doesn't begin to happen consistently.
Okay. There's two things I want to ask. One is these people who just talk too much. You have to interrupt them sometimes. What do you suggest you do in that instance?
Well, keep in mind that from our first two modules, people only talk too much consistently with the support of the rest of the group. Someone needs to say, we've heard you now for the third time making the same point. Can you tell me what you need so that you feel that you have been heard? Because that is often what's going on when people feel the need to repeat themselves.
Got it.
And then once they feel heard, all that drops out.
Okay. So, Michael, you use the word consistently a lot. Can you say more about that? Why that's so important?
Yes. It's really about inconsistency. Inconsistency creates a culture of uncertainty and cautiousness, where the best bet becomes to simply be silent. That is what we want to avoid at all costs. It may be hard to do, but it certainly is fair.
So inconsistency creates uncertainty. Uncertainty makes you feel less safe on a team. And so you want to be consistently, number one, open and candid with your folks, transparent, which we talked about first. You want to be consistently kind of curious and appreciative of other people. That's the second thing we talked about, creating safety. And third, you want to consistently listen to people and not interrupt them. So that's the third thing we talked about in terms of creating safety on teams. And that's something a leader should emulate in their behavior. So it's all well and good if a leader does all of those things, but how do you get others in the team or other people in the organization to do the same thing?
Okay. If you have modeled being candid, forthright, curious, open, you are interested, inviting, and appreciative, it's time to have a conversation with your people about your expectation that they do the same. This is not just about making a statement. This is about having a discussion about everyone behaving that way and developing a consensus around behaving that way. Include an agreement about speaking up about perceived team dysfunctions. In the two previous modules, we've seen how cultural and group norms against speaking up can develop very unwittingly and thereby creating the dysfunctions that we don't want. Speaking up or disagreeing is easily seen as risky, however, potentially offensive to the leader and possibly career limiting. Accordingly, leaders must be persistent in seeking input from all team members, listening well, and not taking silence as consent.
Okay. So as a leader, you have to model. So what I heard there was that as a leader, you need to model those behaviors and actively kind of encourage others to model those behaviors as well, or practice those behaviors, I should say. And
but not just encouraging, it's have a group conversation so that they agree to do the same thing.
Okay, so make it really explicit. Sit down and talk about it. We need to have open candor. We need to be curious and appreciative of each other. We need to not interrupt. So just have that conversation is what you're saying.
Yes, and actually we will cover how to build such agreements in a coming course.
Okay, great. So we're still talking about, so that was primarily about safety on teams. Let's talk about, and as we said at the beginning, conflict competence is something we're going to talk about in another course because it's such a big topic. And decision making is something we're going to talk about in another course because that's also a big topic. What else to create safety on teams, that sort of openness, curiosity, all those things we talked about. What other things can we do to create these healthy teams?
Mm-hmm. There actually are a couple of other practices that help increase the flow of information, even in groups that are already safe and conflict competent. There are check-ins and check-outs. I never allow a group to start without a check-in or to end without a check-out. Check-in involves everyone responding to some question, the answers to which will feed the group sound and current data about whatever may or may not be going on with them. So an example of such question could include, how are you this morning? But mean it. What would you like to accomplish during this meeting? What could we do to make this meeting really work for you? Or tell us something about yourself that no one here really knows. Those are just a few examples of check-in questions that feed groups.
Cool. It's you just brought to memory those teams which always started with a quick. They call it the pre-conversation. We used to call it, how are you doing? What's been going on with your dog, your family, you're this, you're that. It just kind of, you develop this connection with people that you don't normally have just by checking in with them, seeing what's going on. So what purpose do these check-ins serve?
Just one quick thought about what you just said is that when you do it informally, often somebody gets left out.
That's true.
So if you do it formally, you make sure that everybody gets included.
Gotcha.
That way, everybody is involved.
Good point.
Back to your question. Check-ins basically have three purposes. The first one is to break the ice in the meeting. Once someone hears his or her own voice, within a meeting, it's easier for them to continue to speak up. 2, it helps group members shift their focus from whatever they were doing to being present for the purpose of the meeting at hand. And 3, it feeds the group good information about what's going on with each individual person that may or may not need to be dealt with.
But do I really have time to do this, Michael? It's a 30-minute meeting. That sounds like it's going to take a lot of time.
Well, Ronnie, you pay me now, you pay me later. Groups that do checkouts tend to maintain their healthiness and never need folks like me. Well,
all right. It's maintenance. That's what I'm hearing.
Me and you.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So you mentioned checkout. So what's a checkout and what purpose does that serve? How's that different?
Checkouts, again, provide every person the opportunity to speak to the quality of the meeting and the results produced. In this manner, groups will know how well it did and can plan to adjust whatever is necessary for improvement at its next session.
Great. So let's just bring this all back together. We talked about how do you create healthy teams, specifically about the first topic of that was just creating safety on teams and a sense of belonging, right? So safety consists of having that kind of open candor, as I like to call it. The second point is you need to have curious appreciation to have safety. Third is don't interrupt. And that's another way you create safety on teams. And it's really about building connections with one another and a sense of belonging, as I like to think about it. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Michael?
I think you've covered that waterfront beautifully.
All right.
Good job.
All right. So we're going to switch gears now. We're going to and move to another topic of how you fix dysfunctional teams. So let's take a pause and move to the next, and before we move on to the next topic.